Hey everyone, welcome. We'll get started in just a second. So we still have some people joining, and while we wait, just make sure you post it in the chat now what city you're tuning in from. All right, everyone, we'll get started in 2 minutes. So just keep dropping in the chat as you join what city you're in. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this amazing webinar, What's Next in the Struggle for Abortion Rights. My name is Kim Smith, and I'm an organizer with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I'm based in Columbia, South Carolina. We're here tonight because on Friday, June 24th, the Supreme Court ruled to overturn Roe. We no longer have constitutional protections for our right to control our own bodies. This ruling could be used to justify overturning more of our human rights that we've struggled for: the right to contraception, the right to same-sex marriage, and laws banning same-sex relationships. In response to last Friday's ruling, PSL branches joined with and called dozens of protests from across all the cities in the US. We saw immediately a new grassroots movement come to life under the banner, "We won't go back." A giant demonstration of determined people from all walks of life, all races, all genders, all religions, backgrounds, ages. We all came together. And our party has been active in this struggle since our founding 18 years ago. We've been linking it and holding it up as a major working class issue, because that's what it is, an issue for the working class. From our perspective, the only reason abortion rights were even achieved in the first place was because of the struggle, because of tens of millions of women demanding justice in the 1960s and early 1970s. The people's struggle will be the path to win. It's the only path to win and secure abortion rights once and for all, and all rights once again. So in that spirit, we want to welcome everyone for joining us this evening. Whether you're a PSL member already, whether you're just a friend, or you're just someone who just met us and is really interested in learning more about socialist organizing and wants to learn more about the PSL. The overturning of Roe will set off trigger bans in 13 states banning abortion. Another 13 states are likely to ban abortion now that federal abortion protections have been destroyed. Many of these state laws are going to make abortion a felony and do not provide exceptions in the case of rape or incest. In Oklahoma, for example, abortion bans are set to start from the moment of fertilization. This is a total disregard for bodily autonomy of women and other people who can become pregnant, and it's shameful that the ruling class would do this to us. Today in South Carolina, the fetal heartbeat ban took effect, banning abortion after 6 weeks. In response, here in South Carolina, we went to the state capitol and wanted to confront this outrageous attack on women, on reproductive rights, this attack on the working class. So I wanted to show you some photos and videos, and this is where we were today, in the streets. Sorry, y'all, for the tech issues, but as you can see from the photos and the videos, it was a powerful demonstration with people all over. I think we're going to try to get the sound situated and replay the video.
Abortion rights are under attack. What do we do? Stand up like that. Abortion rights are under attack. What do we do? Stand up like that. Trans rights are under attack. What do we do? Stand up like that. When BIPOC rights are under attack, what the fuck do we do? Stand up like that. Abortion rights.
Okay, amazing. And we also want to draw attention to the fact that there's an important struggle going on in Kansas right now as well. Right now, the right to abortion is in the state constitution because it states the right to bodily autonomy of residents. But now, the right-wing state legislature has placed on the ballot for August 2nd an amendment to the Constitution that, if passed, will allow the state to ban abortion, even in the case of incest, rape, or danger to the woman's life. That's disgusting. We urge all who live in Kansas to vote no on the amendment this coming August 2nd. PSL members in Kansas and the larger progressive community will be mobilizing for a no vote. We know that abortion bans will not stop abortions. They will only stop safe abortions. Millions of women's lives, millions of all working class people's lives will be at risk because of these vicious attacks on women. Before Roe, women had abortions. Many working class women resorted to dangerous self-abortions while others paid for expensive and also dangerous illegal abortions. Today, the availability of medication abortion has the potential to eliminate the dangerous back alley abortions that characterized the pre-Roe years. But the right wing attacks on medication abortion mean in some states, organizers and everyday people will be forced to defy or circumvent restrictive laws to access abortion pills. This increases the dangers of criminalization and incarceration. Tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets in protest, some for the very first time. Now, what can be done? What's next? That's the larger question. So our amazing speakers tonight are going to answer that question from a wide range of perspectives. We're going to discuss how we got here, what the federal government can and should do in response to this emergency, and what those of us have been in the streets can do to be politically impactful in the immediate, and also to build a strong fighting working class and women's movement over the long term. We will hear from organizers in New York, Georgia, and New Mexico. And while our protests continue to demand federal legislation to make abortion a right and the elimination of the filibuster, the PSL also demands the White House take emergency action, as we explained in a recent statement. A public health emergency can be declared. So don't believe the Democrats when they say that nothing can be done. It's up to vote blue. A public health emergency can be declared. Federal facilities and military hospitals can be open to offer abortion care. These and many other actions are well within presidential authority without federal legislation. We definitely want to get into that tonight. So first, let's hear from our first speaker, Karina, calling in from NYC.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, yay, awesome. Good evening, comrades. So I hope everyone had the chance to read our newest statement on the abortion rights struggle. I think it was an excellent piece, and I want to thank all the comrades who worked on it, and to all the comrades everywhere who have been responding in real time to these serious attacks on poor and working class families. Following the Supreme Court's misogynistic, anti-democratic decision to overthrow Roe v. Wade, we're demanding that President Biden take immediate emergency action all around the country in all 50 states. The idea that the government can do nothing substantial at this moment, that its hands are tied, that we have to wait until November is ridiculous, and everybody knows it. Comrade Elizabeth is going to go into this in greater depth, but the point is that this isn't a time for empty rhetoric and more electoral fundraising emails. It's time for action. The people in the streets know that this is a matter of political will, and that's why our message has been so welcome and so popular. Elizabeth is going to go more into the party's program of action for the current moment. But before we get into that, I want to take a minute to talk about how we got here. So I've been working in the reproductive justice world for nearly 10 years. I've been organizing in many different regions in the country, from the South to the Texas border to here in New York. And the truth is that for the last 50 years, in fact, the right wing has been steadily organizing and strategizing on this issue. And on the other side, the Democratic Party has proven time and time again that abortion rights are not a priority. They have passed the buck on and on to codify Roe into law, despite the demands of the movement and the majority opinion of all the people around the country. And they've used this as a political football to raise money and to drum up votes. And it's this strategy that has led us to this movement, this moment. As socialists right now, we have two main tasks. One is to build the movement. right? To raise people's demands as far as possible, to unite as much as possible with other forces around these demands, to resist the defeatism of some nonprofit organizations aligned to the Democratic Party, and unite with all of the people on the streets who want to fight. Donating to abortion funds is good and necessary, but it's not enough. Secondly, we have to raise political consciousness to help people understand how this happened and what are the systemic features and the political features that allowed things to develop in this way. This kind of consciousness is necessary if we're going to build a new feminist movement that's linked to a working class agenda. We have to understand that with the overthrow of Roe, one era has ended and a new one has begun. So my presentation is to help us understand this stage that has ended. So as I said, this is a culmination of a nearly 50-year strategy on the part of conservatives who pushed back against the gains of the 1960s and 1970s social movements, against the women's movement, the Black freedom movement, the Chicano movement, the LGBTQ movement, and so many others that were organizing. In the 1960s and the early 70s, there were a slew of progressive reforms for women's rights, civil rights, expansions of social safety net programs that all came from the social movements of that period. But the moment that those movements ebbed or declined, there were big backlashes to try to overturn those rights that were won from the capitalist class, and especially from the hard right capitalists and bankers who really wanted to deregulate and go after labor unions and go after social spending, the gains that the movement had won. And then on the other side, there's also a religious conservatism based in the churches, the Catholic Church and big evangelical churches opposed to the Cultural Revolution and really the women's movement, which had challenged patriarchy, male supremacy in the home and in the community, and was a cornerstone issue for them. What this new sector within the Republican Party did, which some people call the new right, was that it married together two trends: fiscal or financial conservatism with religious conservatism. It didn't necessarily mean that people on Wall Street necessarily cared about abortion rights, but by producing politicians who could say the right words to the religious right, they would essentially gain a mass base for their right-wing economic policies. Ronald Reagan represented the fusion of these different trends with his relationship with the mega churches that called themselves the moral majority. Neither moral nor a majority, but that's them, right? Duplicitous, shameless liars. Ronald Reagan famously said to these mega churches, quote, "I know you can't endorse me, but I endorse you." And this unholy alliance made opposition to abortion rights a new litmus test within the Republican Party, along with opposition to regulation on corporations and anti-union politics. And to advance through the political or judicial fields in the right wing, you had to have these politics. And these are the networks that groomed Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett and Samuel Alito. These people have been vetted and groomed for this moment their whole careers. They're the children of the conservative backlash to the social movements of the 60s and 70s, our movements. So this is about much more than just abortion. All of this was happening in plain sight. It's not just the PSL that has this analysis. In fact, the Democratic Party leaders could come up here and say how the Republicans have used the issue of abortion rights to divide and distract and scapegoat in a completely cynical manner to avoid the real problems of society. They could say that. However, their strategy has been all along, well, vote for us and we'll keep the right wing from succeeding. And that obviously has completely failed. The Democrats have had many chances to codify Roe v. Wade into law and make abortion a federal right. They had a Democratic majority in the House and Senate under the Carter administration, under the Clinton administration, under the Obama administration, and now under the Biden administration. And they've repeatedly promised and they've never delivered. They've used abortion as an issue to get votes, and then they never make it a priority once in office. And that's what's been the downfall. Sadly, many women's organizations, progressive women's organizations, actually believe these lies. They believed that if they had a seat at the table or friends in high places, that abortion rights would be protected. That in fact, mobilizing the masses of women and progressive people was not the priority, not effective. Some would even call it a waste of time. And they've been proven so wrong. And so all of this energy that could have been spent to revive a fighting women's movement was spent every 2 years on electioneering and lobbying. And it's actually the right wing that has been more aggressive at the grassroots level and has been taking up more public space and dominating the narrative, even though they are completely outnumbered in every imaginable way. So I take no joy in saying this, but we have to be honest. If this moment it's going to be a true wake-up call, we can't just wake up and do the same thing we did that landed us here in the first place. That said, the fight against patriarchy and capitalism continues. It's still pride in many places, and we know that abortion rights goes beyond just women. They impact trans men, non-binary people, and honestly, cis men too, because we're all part of a community. We all have a family, chosen or otherwise. And as we're inclusive and expansive in the struggle, we also have to recognize too that this struggle is historically rooted in patriarchal systems designed to control women and their decision-making power. And this right in particular was won because of a powerful feminist movement that brought women who had been suffering under male domination as individuals into motion by the millions and made them a collective force. So we have to get out there this summer. We have to talk to our people. We have to keep the fight alive. This is a dark time, but our movement has gone through darker times. If you think about the time before Roe, and if you expand your view to the whole world, which we do, if you think about the many countries where abortion has been completely illegal, but through determined struggle, using a combination of above ground and underground tactics, the women's movement prevailed, such as Mexico and Argentina recently. The main lesson here is we can't stop fighting. If those who are conscious, who are progressive, who have the desire to fight, if you're the type of person who comes to a webinar about abortion rights on a weeknight, you have a special role to play in this next stage of history. Because as long as the conscious element commits itself to find a way to resist, to keep organizing, we know that the movement cannot be broken. It can be set back, but it can't be defeated. It's only when the conscious element throws up its hands and says, that's it, I'm gonna just go off on my own, that's when we really lose, right? And we've seen people like ourselves who have braved even worse conditions than these, who have organized underground if need be, under conditions of outright dictatorship if need be. And they've still emerged victorious because their will to fight was not broken. So we are not gonna fall into despondency. They want us to be isolated, alone, and distracted, but we're going to be connected, disciplined, and sharp. It's capitalism or it's us, and we're going to continue to choose us. All of us, all our issues, all the class. Ours is a popular feminism, a working class revolutionary socialist feminism, and it brings together all the struggles for dignity of the people. I want to close with one of the experiences I had 5 years ago to this date in June. We were at the Supreme Court with some of the reproductive justice organizers in Texas, fighting another Supreme Court case around abortion. It was called the Whole Woman's Health versus Helterset. The situation looked dire, and everyone thought we would lose, including many reproductive rights organizers, and we won. These women I work with work in the most impoverished places, in places where abortion rights have long been deprived, where basic healthcare has long been deprived, where repression and the threat of deportation loom. I've met women who have even swam across the border from the US to Mexico to get healthcare there, and who have continued to organize under the most difficult conditions. Their convictions remain firm. Since 2012, they've seen millions of dollars of funding cut for women's health in their area. Reproductive health clinics that primarily served poor and working class women, trans youth, and LGBTQ people forced to shut down. Have they given up? No. Have they stopped fighting? No. Just 5 years ago, they were told it was all over, and the court ended up ruling in their favor. Politics are not stagnant. Things can change, but we have to make them change. One way or another, we're going to do just that, and we invite everyone to join us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karina. Next up, we're going to hear from Elizabeth, also from New York City.
Thank you, Karina. I mean, I got goosebumps. Ready. I'm ready to be out here in this fight. Thank you for your important analysis on how we got to this point. The Supreme Court just delivered a gut punch to the women of this country. A majority of 9 undemocratically appointed judges just told over half of the population that our bodies are not ours to control and that our healthcare decisions do not belong to us. We live in a country where corporations are people and brutality and murder are of no real concern, but a simple healthcare procedure that saves and protects lives of millions is no longer a right. The Dobbs decision is a culmination of attacks on women's rights that has been building for the last decade, but it should be seen as an attack on the entire working class. That is part of a larger assault on the working class. This decision is a clear calling from the Supreme Court to attack many of the victories that we've won over the last 40 years, from abortion rights to gay marriage. The attacks on abortion right is an ongoing attack on women's rights, on trans rights, and on equal rights for all. This ruling exposes the true nature of the capitalist system, which seeks to attack all of the progressive rights gained for poor and working people. It is not just an attack on bodily autonomy. This is class war. If we've learned anything from this ruling, is that the Supreme Court is an illegitimate institution and it does not reflect the will of the American people. There is absolutely nothing democratic about ignoring the 72% of Americans who wanted Roe to stay intact. These 9 undemocratically appointing judges serving life terms should not have the power to deny our human rights, our rights to participate equally in society. The Supreme Court must be abolished. And in response to this decision, President Biden calls for passive actions and wants to lecture to everyone about how to protest peacefully, and suggesting somehow that we're the violent ones. This is an aim to mute our movement, but we will not allow that, right? Because this ruling is an economically, socially, and politically violent ruling against poor and working people across the United States. This did not go over well in the streets, and I'm sure many of you experienced that. And we're done. We're done being told that abortion rights will be up on the ballot. The Democrats have failed us time and time again by failing to fight for our equality and codifying abortion rights into federal law. In less than 30 days from today, 13 states will have made abortion a felony. I'll say that again, a felony. Followed by 13 more states. Weeks later, that will have almost total abortion bans. Tens of millions of people in the United States cannot wait for the election season. We need legal abortions now. We need Congress to act now. And we will give them hell until they act and until they defend our rights. While our protests continue to demand federal legislations to make abortion a right and the elimination of the filibuster, we must also demand the White House to take emergency action. From the PSL's perspective, it is essential that we emphasize these things right now. We cannot give away to defeatism, because once we do that, then the right wing would have truly won, as people will continue to struggle for their rights. And it also lets Democrats off the hook, and it feeds into their narratives that the elections are the only remedy. And we cannot emphasize this enough. Executive action can take place and it is legal. It is a matter of political will. All the Democratic leaders who claim that they support abortion rights and will fight for them Now is the time for them to put their money where their mouth is and to take bold action. A public health emergency can be declared. Biden can take the following actions right now to protect abortion rights. Open abortion clinics on federal lands and military hospitals. Prepare the Justice Department to fight states attempting to criminalize travel for abortion. Grant federal employees pay leave of absence to travel to another state for abortions. Create federal education campaigns on medical abortion and the use of the pills. And these are just a few items, and there's more. But let's talk about some of the excuses that they'll make for not taking action, because they're all wrong. Some of us here know about the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment is a rider that has been attached to the budget since 1976, which prohibits Medicaid from paying for abortions for poor women. It is commonly known as preventing federal funds for abortion, but that's not totally right. It has never been tested outside of the very particular context. It has never been written to prevent a public health emergency declaration or to set up clinics on federal facilities on an emergency basis and with other federal agencies. And even though the Hyde Amendment remains on the books, it should not be constructed as a kind of amendment to the Constitution that prevents Biden from taking emergency action right now to protect providers and patients. Of course, the Hyde Amendment is racist, sexist, anti-poor, and belongs in the dustbin of history. But if Biden were to fight, to take action, he would save lives in the immediate. He would meet the emergency, and this would produce a big surge of energy. The masses would be brought into motion to defend this decision. 34 Democratic senators, that's the majority of the Democrats in the Senate, are actually calling for Biden to do this. And he's taken this under advisement and hasn't acted. This is a big pressure point that we as a movement have to push on now. So just to reiterate, in addition to our burning outrage against the Supreme Court and the right wing, we believe that it is imperative to now make sharp demands on the Democratic Party leadership, the ruling party, the party in office. This is the best way to keep our movement strong, to seize the moment, and to find a way out of this emergency. And we can't be concerned on whether it takes the air out of their electoral bubble, or if it makes the Democrats look bad, or if it makes people uncomfortable. Because you know what's really uncomfortable? Getting your essential human rights stripped away all of a sudden, and then being falsely told that there's nothing the federal government can do. So we believe all actions going forward have to have this demand at the forefront and center. Federal action now. Set up federal clinics to provide abortion access in all 50 states. Then there are other demands that we can go deeper into. Call for the Senate to abolish the filibuster. And that too is perfectly doable. The Senate makes its own rules. The filibuster is quite frankly made up, not in the Constitution. And it's an undemocratic measure that has been used primarily to oppose progressive change. Going back to the time of Jim Crow, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are defending the filibuster really because they're afraid that without it, the Trump tax cuts will be reversed and social spending will be expanded to provide universal childcare and other vitally needed social programs. And Biden claims to be upset with them, but he's refusing to go against the filibuster too. He's more concerned with the legitimacy of the Senate as an institution, as if having an undemocratic measure makes this institution more legitimate in the eyes of the people. He could also call for the Supreme Court to be expanded, since that size too is not in the Constitution. We've seen time and again how aggressive the right wing has been to take control over this institution. But according to reports, Biden is still most concerned with defending its institutional legitimacy rather than undermining it. He could in fact expand the court, as some senators like Bernie Sanders have called for, to defend women's rights, labor rights, environmental rights, LGBTQ rights, and so many more. And this is all shows us that while we're making demands on the Biden administration, it doesn't mean we have the illusion that he is like awesome, because he's quite frankly not, or we don't have an illusion that the White House is gonna push forward these things. And we know that Biden has a long history of being anti-choice and personally defending the Hyde Amendment. But this is not a critical element. What's most critical is what we do, and what we do right now. The government can protect and expand abortion rights at this moment, but we're going to have to make them. The people of this country are capable of forcing great change, like we did in 2020 in the rebellion against racism. We are the force necessary to win reproductive rights, to overcome racism and sexism. People's power is what it's going to take to defend our bodily autonomy, to defend our civil rights, and to secure equality. And as Flo Kennedy once said, don't agonize, organize.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. If I wasn't already a member, I'll be signing up to join once again. And thank you also so much for Karina. And just a note, Karina and Elizabeth were both speaking on behalf of the Central Committee of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And Elizabeth is so amazing, is also an editor of Breaking the Chains magazine, our socialist feminist magazine. So next up, we're going to have PSL member Addie from Atlanta, Georgia.
Good evening. My name is Addison. I'm an organizer with the PSL in Georgia. In response to the overturning of Roe, the Atlanta branch of the PSL mobilized thousands of working class people into the streets in 3 major demonstrations on Friday, the same day as the Supreme Court decision, and on Saturday. We organized actions in both Atlanta and the city of Athens, which is about 2 hours east of Atlanta. In the South, we also saw protests in Louisville, Kentucky, Asheville, North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, multiple cities in Florida, in New Orleans, Louisiana, and more, with more actions planned in the coming weeks. The overwhelming sentiment of the people who took to the streets this past weekend was complete outrage at the Supreme Court. Our calls for the Supreme Court to be abolished were met with roaring cheers and support. The overturning of Roe is largely unpopular. Many see through the failure and unwillingness of the Democratic Party to fight when our rights are under attack by the right wing that it repeatedly concedes to. The Democrats have campaigned on codifying abortion rights into law for literal decades, despite having many opportunities to do so with majorities in all branches of government. Twice this year, they failed to pass the Women's Healthcare Protection Act. The fact is, the Democrats do not want to lose this bargaining chip they use to campaign and ask for donations. They have already started telling people once again to take the fight for abortions to the polls in November. Meanwhile, the Republicans are happy to have achieved their goal of overturning Roe and will set their sights on new territory, such as total sweeping abortion bans in all 50 states. This is a moment in which everyday people are questioning their confidence in the Democratic Party, as they should. At this critical turning point for reproductive justice, people are learning that all the rights that people have secured through mass struggle are not guaranteed, and that they can be taken away by this or that politician or undemocratic institution under this capitalist system. This callous system has placed in danger the lives of tens of millions of girls, women, transgender, and non-binary people. Georgia is one of the 26 states with a trigger ban or abortion ban that would lose access to legal abortion or severely restrict abortion within 30 days of the ruling. Georgia passed a fetal heartbeat abortion ban in 2019, which will soon become the law of the land. In much of the southern states, bans are already in effect or are expected to be soon. Mississippi is set to enforce its trigger law in just 8 more days, banning abortion in all cases except rape, assuming you file a police report, or at the risk of death. Disgustingly, outrageous bans in states like Louisiana include no exceptions, even for cases of rape or incest. Bans are currently being challenged in state courts, and in some cases, we are seeing temporary blocks on enforcing the bans. But what happens in a few weeks? With Roe now overturned, Nothing is in the way of the organized right wing to pursue total bans to the fullest extent possible. Nothing but a mass movement that we in the millions must come together to build can stop them. Bans on abortion have a disproportionate effect on already marginalized communities. Black and Hispanic people receive many more abortions than white people, mainly due to a lack of access to contraceptives. The wealth of white households in the US is 7.8 times higher than Black households, so Black people often do not have the money or resources necessary to travel to their nearest abortion provider. These systemic issues are heightened in the South, and in particular the Black Belt. Rates of pregnancy-related deaths, called maternal mortality, are higher in Georgia than 47 other states in the nation. In 2016, Black people in Georgia had more than twice as many maternal deaths than white people. Only 26 medical facilities in Georgia actually provide abortions, leaving around 95% of counties with no abortion providers at all. Transgender people also cannot be left out of the conversation. Trans employees make, on average, 32% less income than their cisgender counterparts. Many are prevented access to similar jobs in the first place, regardless of education levels, which also often means lack of access to healthcare. When transgender men become pregnant, the social stigmas they face in their workplaces and communities are intense. 2021 was the deadliest year recorded for trans people in regards to violent fatal attacks, and trans men need to have the option to terminate pregnancies. Trans people also face discrimination at abortion centers. Only 23% of abortion clinics in the US offer transgender-specific healthcare. As a result of this discrimination, many trans people consider attempting to perform abortion on themselves. A 2019 survey found that nearly 1 in 5 transgender respondents had actually followed through and attempted to terminate their own pregnancies. There is a common misconception that transgender people who are concentrated in blue states are concentrated in blue states and liberal cities, where abortion may continue to be available for the time being. However, for jobs that I have personally worked, I have met dozens of trans children in the most rural areas of Georgia, both in and out of the closet. Counties with endless Trump flags and far-right local governments. These areas already have few, if any, abortion clinics. Understandably, there is a focus on securing abortion funds and establishing or expanding abortion services through nonprofits or grassroots efforts, which is good, but the onus should be on the state that is attacking and taking away our rights. It is imperative that we continue to demand federal emergency measures and the legalization of abortion at the federal level in all 50 states. Without these federal measures, many women and trans people will fall through the cracks, not have access to these grassroots resources, and possibly die. There is no substitute for a political struggle against those in power to win abortion rights. There is a saying, so goes the South, the nation goes. The ruling class forces of reaction, the right-wing forces, are concentrated in the South. The fight back here in the South will be critical to shaping the abortion struggle nationally. And what the demonstrations in Georgia and other parts of the South this weekend show is that people are able and willing to fight back in the states imposing some of the most reactionary laws. But we are also seeing fight back in the South on all fronts, from labor organizing against poverty wages and fighting for unions, to demonstrations in small rural towns against racist police terror and white supremacy during the summer 2020 rebellion. We saw some of the largest demonstrations for the liberation of Palestine in the South last year, showing the potential for growing anti-imperialist consciousness in the South. The people of the South and the rest of the nation will not accept these egregious attacks on their rights. They will fight back, and we will fight alongside them every step of the way and help build a militant mass movement. One thing is for sure, people are hungry for an alternative and want to know what that alternative would look like and how to get there. I couldn't tell you how many times the crowds actually, would break into cheers every time I named capitalism as the problem. One of the most popular chants was, "You can't stop the revolution, socialism is the solution." This growing socialist consciousness in the South is crucial for the struggle ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Addie. And now we're going to hear from Ramona from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to speak a bit about the Albuquerque PSL's next steps in the struggle for reproductive justice. We are in a state where the right to access abortion is not immediately threatened due to the recent repeal of a pre-Roe abortion ban. Still, women here desperately need expanded access to abortion because of the chronic underfunding of healthcare and continued attacks against women under capitalism. From 1969 to 2021, New Mexico had a law on the books that made abortion a criminal offense. This law was unenforceable due to the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. However, with the recent ultra-conservative dominated Supreme Court, the real fear that this unenforced abortion ban could become the law of the land spurred action. From 2018 to 2021, several organizations in New Mexico, including the Party for Socialism and Liberation, helped force the repeal of New Mexico's 1969 ban on abortion. In 2018 and 2019, the vote to repeal this ban failed because a full 1/3 of Democratic Party state senators in New Mexico voted to uphold it. The Democratic Party's failure to repeal New Mexico's abortion ban when they had all the power to do so speaks volumes about the hollowness of the 2018 blue wave. In the months before the 2019 legislative session, the PSL and other progressive groups gathered thousands of signatures to show support for the repeal of the ban and presented them to the legislature. In addition, the PSL attended open comment sessions to speak in support of repealing the ban and expanding abortion access in New Mexico. On the opening day of the 2019 legislative session, the PSL held a demonstration outside the New Mexico Capitol building, and then 1 week later dropped a 30-foot banner from the gallery of the House Legislative Chamber that read, "Repeal the abortion ban now." These actions brought widespread attention to the pre-Roe abortion ban and informed many people who were unaware of the law and what was at stake. In 2020, many of the anti-abortion Democrats who had voted to uphold the ban lost their primaries. This, with more grassroots organizing, helped lead the way to the ban's repeal in 2021. This success was important, but major steps remain to ensure the rights of women in New Mexico, even if we do not have a pre-Roe ban or trigger law on the books. We especially need to ensure the rights of working class and poor women, Black, Latina, and Native women, and queer people to access abortions. Now, after the outright overturning of Roe, the Democratic Party of New Mexico and its supporters are patting themselves on the back for having helped repeal the pre-Roe ban just in time. At a rally on the day of the Dobbs decision, Democratic Party elites completely lacked a sense of urgency in their speeches. They proudly explained that women in New Mexico still have the right to an abortion, and that New Mexico will be a haven for people from neighboring trigger law states. However, they did not mention that half of New Mexico's population live in rural areas with vast poverty and lack of infrastructure and have virtually no abortion access, sort of what Addie was talking about. There are 6 abortion clinics in New Mexico, yet it is the 5th largest state in the US in terms of area. In addition, the vital need for abortion in these few clinics has been strained by women coming to New Mexico from other states with anti-women laws. Now that Roe has been overturned, New Mexico can expect to see a 2,000% increase in the number of women traveling from neighboring trigger law states to New Mexico clinics for abortion access. This exponential increase will further strain New Mexico's completely underfunded and inadequate reproductive health facilities. Furthermore, the cost of abortions remains prohibitively expensive in New Mexico, one of the poorest states in the US. Costs range from $1,000 to $3,000, making it exceedingly difficult for working class women to afford. The unwanted pregnancy rate in New Mexico is one of the highest in the nation, but with high costs and few clinics, many women struggle to find abortion access, even though it is fully legal. Right now, the Democrats once again have a large majority in both chambers of the New Mexico State Legislature, as well as control of the governor's mansion. Instead of allowing the Democrats to opportunistically pat themselves on the back, the Albuquerque PSL is demanding that they take emergency action to drastically expand grossly inadequate abortion access and services throughout New Mexico and enshrine the right to abortion into the state constitution. Just yesterday, the Democratic governor spoke to the press and stated that she would postpone any public discussion about expanding abortion access until after the November elections. It's hard to see this as anything but another Democratic Party use of women's rights as a political talking point to win the next election. Why wait till after November? Much more needs to be done to make medical and surgical abortions available in New Mexico. In addition to emergency executive action by President Biden, we are calling on the governor to use state executive and legislative power to expand abortion services in New Mexico, including convening a special legislative session. For those reasons, this Friday, the PSL is calling an emergency march for abortion rights to march to the federal building in Albuquerque to make our demands heard. Plus, in the wake of the overturning of Roe and understanding the need to rebuild a mass movement for reproductive justice, like the one that won us Roe in the first place, the Albuquerque PSL is planning a women's socialism conference on Saturday, July 16th. Our conference will include talks about how capitalism breeds sexism and patriarchy and how women and LGBTQ plus people have fought back. It will include talks on topics such as women in the labor movement, US imperialism, and violence against women. Plus, we will have workshops on launching a new mass movement for abortion rights, as well as on how capitalism oppresses women at work and at home. We will have presentations on why only with socialism will we see an end to attacks on reproductive rights and be able to build towards the full liberation of women. Please join us for our Women's Socialism Conference on July 16th in Albuquerque. Keep up the fight. La lucha sigue.
Thank you so much, Ramona, for that amazing talk. So now, y'all, before we wrap everything up, we want to answer a few questions from those who have asked specifically about what it really means to get involved with PSL. Because in the last few days, hundreds of people have written to us about that. So we just wanted to just address that here. For one, we want to work with everyone who wants to join the struggle. We've created a list of events. So if you pop over to liberationnews.org, you'll see all the upcoming protests and events. But we have to, be realistic. Events like this just don't happen on their own. They require organizers. PSL members we're all organizers. We not only agree with the party, but we commit ourselves to participating and organizing in one way or another. There's so many tasks and projects that the party is involved in. Not just abortion, we're involved in the struggle against mass incarceration, the struggle for housing, environmental struggles, the LGBTQ plus struggle, rights to food. No matter what the struggle is and where it is, the PSL is involved. Even while fighting in all these different issues, we're all united by a common program to fight for the interests of the working class and oppressed, to build working class unity against our common enemies, to stand against racism and imperialism. And we are united by the belief that only a revolutionary transformation can really address the many ills of capitalism. These injustices we're facing are symptoms of that disease, the capitalist system. And socialism is the only cure. So while we join into every struggle to defend the people's rights, that ultimately is what we're fighting for. To be a member means regularly organizing in your local area, studying and learning about the struggles in the US and around the world, actively working to distribute socialist statements and literature, books, and videos, and making a regular financial pledge to support. This is the only thing that allows us to have a truly politically independent working class organization. And we know that the ruling class has its leaders, organizers, cadres, its think tanks, organizations, and all these different institutions. And we're the many, but they are right now better organized. So we need to develop our own leaders, organizations, and institutions if we are to help our class, the vast majority, take them on and win, because we can win and we will win. This is a big task, but those of us in the PSL dedicate ourselves every day over many years to making this a reality, taking inspiration from and learning the lessons of other revolutionary movements worldwide. So if this excites you and it interests you and you want to get involved, take a second and apply to join at pslweb.org/join. And if you've already joined, make sure you're on the lookout for a call or text from one of our organizers soon. With that being said, thank you all for joining tonight. And like Addie said, you can't stop a revolution. Socialism is the only solution. Thank y'all.